Welcome to the Metal Substance, the ongoing series about metal music and its history, dedicated to the long term goal of funding the creation of a city metal philharmonic. I'm your host, call me Victor. Last time, we talked about Black Sabbath's second album. Today, we hit number three. Probably, I think, the most iconic of the early Black Sabbath records. To a layman, this is the one that usually gets put on t shirts. In fact, I think that there's this. It's kind of cute because if you go onto the Black Sabbath Master of Reality official full album upload from 8 years ago, the top comment is a woman talking about how she met her current fiance, probably by now husband, because they each had a Black Sabbath Master of Reality shirt. So Black Sabbath leads you to your soulmate. Pretty cool. So Black Sabbath's Master of Reality, recorded and released in 1971, is another of a little bit over half hour of early metal classics. In this album, we see Black Sabbath continuing to experiment, continuing to break new ground in what most people say is the official start of the doom metal subgenre. Now, we've been talking about doom metal a lot, and when we're talking about Black Sabbath, especially, that comes up a lot. This is the album, though, where the formula, the template is really laid down. At the same time, Black Sabbath are beginning to expand their soundscape, particularly with the instrumental tracks Embryo and Orchid, one on each side of the record. Let's get the controversial thing out of the way. Sweetleaf. One of the foundations, the song Sweetleaf, I mean, one of the foundations of stoner metal. And some of you may be saying, well, Victor, you've always worked jobs since you were a teenager where you had to pee in a cup to keep your job. So you're not qualified to talk about stoner metal. Well, if that was true, then how come I am able to do this? Oh, wait, whoops, Bluetooth's on. How come I'm able to do this? If I wasn't a stoner, would I be able to be obviously ripping this bong and able to talk at the same time? Yeah, I rest my case. I'm supposed to cough. And it's with coughing that this album begins. The story goes that Ozzy Osbourne came into the studio with a really big joint for Tony to smoke, and they had the mic on, and it is a sample of him coughing from hitting that joint that inaugurates this album. So it's kind of a funny song because after a couple of albums of Ozzy singing about unrequited love, here he is singing about being in love, but with drugs. That's fine to me. And it also tells you a lot about Ozzy. Incidentally, I ended up going on a pretty long research tangent because Ozzy in this song talks about, soon the world will love you sweetly. So I started wondering about cannabis consumption and I found a couple of interesting things. Apparently, as of 2010, according to the United Nations report, a United Nations report, cannabis is now the most consumed drug on the planet, used by hundreds of millions of people. But actually, after this song came out in the early 70s, there was a regression in cannabis use. There's a lot of cases of it getting banned globally, usually under pressure from the United States. And it was getting talked about less in scientific public journals. And it's really only post 2000 that there's a serious expansion in both usage and the academic literature. So I went down that rabbit hole. Now you did too. Okay, let's leave the Sonar stuff behind and talk about After Forever. It's an interesting song, lyrically speaking, because it's completely about the idea of a Christian soul. And as we've said in the other album talks, Black Sabbath really is affirming themselves not as a satanic band, but as a band that sings about Satan. Those are different things. Track number 3 is Embryo, and this is where we see a little bit of what I would like to call a neoclassical influence. It's a less than 30-minute track that's just Tony running through this kind of a dual but not really melody line. He's actually doing the opposite of what the War Pigs main riff was, where on that song, Tony talked about keeping that low E string ringing out. And then on Embryo, he's constantly plucking the high E string. So we're getting the other end of the guitar neck. Although he'll sometimes go in and do a little melody line there on that string. So essentially, you've got one melody line that he's playing on the D string and another that he's playing on the high E string. And so it's like a pseudo Baroque acoustic guitar style. This is a great example of why we have to remember that these guys were still trend setting. There were no rules yet. And even now, it's not something you'll see too often in modern metal. I mean, there are bands like Legion comes to mind who really like to embrace the classical, even if they're not strictly neoclassical as a band. And in Embryo, this is giving us another case of where Black Sabbath fans might disagree on exactly how many tracks there really are on this record. Because I'm sure a lot of you would say that you cannot listen to the song Children of the Grave without listening to Embryo first. Let's talk about Children of the Grave. Children of the Grave is another anthem of the Cold War, another lament of anguish to this world that Black Sabbath is inhabiting, in which Ozzy sings that if we don't show that love can survive, if we're not brave enough for that, then surely we will all be children of the grave, doomed to death. It's an anthem that still remains timely, but it must have been especially so in that late 60s, early 70s period where global upheavals were happening culturally, politically, and socially all over the world. Flipping over to side B, we continue with another instrumental, Orchid, which is again Tony Iommi on acoustic guitar. It's different though from Embryo. First of all, this is important because they're doing the acoustic interlude twice on one album, so it's not just this one-off little gimmick. I couldn't even tell you how many bands over the years, I'm looking at you, especially black metal, will just do a little light. Okay, let me hit like 16 notes on the acoustic here on the beginning, do a couple chords, and then we'll dive into the mayhem. And there's no real connection to the rest of the album. On Master of Reality, Embryo and Orchid feel very natural in the flow of the record. Whereas Umbrio had this Baroque double simultaneous melody line going for it, Orchid is a lot more arpeggiated individual notes ringing out on the chords that Tony's going through. It's very pastoral, at least to me. There's some kind of happy chords in there, happy notes that make their way into the melody. And then look at the name of the song, Orchid. Orchid is a flower. Beautiful one. Shout out Twin Peaks fans. And Tony is giving us this beautiful little interlude, and we just after we listened to, Children of the Grave, and this is what I think Black Sabbath was so good about, was living in this world of darkness created by their atmospheres, and then showing you just enough of the light to keep you moving forward, and to also make the sad parts extra sad, because like this is what could be the beauty of the world. And instead, we're choosing to do this. Case in point, track 6, Lord of This World, which literally has the lyrics, your world was made for you by someone above, but you choose evil ways instead of love. You made me master of the world where you exist. The soul I took from you was not even missed. An accessory name, there's not accessory, an accusatory nature uh, to this album. Black Sabbath is saying you are the one who caused the evil things in the world. You are the one who's not doing the right thing. Instead of giving your soul to God, you're giving it to Satan. And now Black Sabbath, that's is the name creationism. But I don't think somebody's religious orientation particularly matters too much when it comes to talking about Black Sabbath. Sabbath is in the name. I think people are surprised by how religious Sabbath really is. Uh, okay, track 7, Solitude. We're continuing this pattern that's established on the record of we're going dark, gloomy, doomy, and then something lighter, acoustic, and more reflective. But while the acoustic tracks have been instrumental so far, Solitude has got some lyrics of its own. And here, Ozzy is just in full lament mode. This is being sad in your bedroom. The world's a lonely place. You're on your own. So it's time to go home, sit down, moan, cry, and think about things, the memories. Crying and thinking is all that I do. Memories I have remind me of you. Uh, so it's the moment of solitude where we sometimes instead of we think of solitude in a positive way, like okay, gosh, everybody's finally leaving me alone, I get some peace of mind. But this is the kind of solitude, the true solitude, where you don't want to be alone and you must be. And so that's what's happening on this record and on this track. And it's not really recognizably metal. It's not a crunchy, doomy, low riff that's playing throughout, although there's plenty of that on this record. Incidentally, I forgot to say, Orchid played in a down-tuned way as well, like a lot of this record, in C sharp standard. And so Solitude is really, I hate to say it, mopey, I hesitate to use that word because it sounds like I'm being derogatory to Black Sabbath themselves, but it is sad, angsty music, uh, and it becomes clear that I have to agree with people who say this is definitely influencing later music like Soundgarden, Nirvana, a lot of the grunge scene. And I think it's part of why grunge has always had this strange relationship with metal where they're kind of like in communion with each other, but they don't go to church together, so to speak. Also, judging by how much people are talking about lighting up under the Solitude track on YouTube, it's another stoner metal anthem, apparently. Finally, we end with Into the Void, the 6 minute plus final track on the album, and it's Black Sabbath in prime form. When it starts out, it's really slow and plodding at the beginning because it's like it's pulling you out of this doomy sidetrack that's been there in their career. That is this album, like especially doomy for the last half hour. And it's bringing back what I think is Black Sabbath at its best when there's groove, when the rhythm section becomes relentless. It's Ozzy Osbourne singing about the end of the world. And the riffs, you could just get lost in them. Maybe you can't mosh to this, but you could certainly move to it. So now the question is, did this album invent doom metal? Well, we're always talking about here on the Metal Substance. Metal doesn't really have a true start point, and neither do subgenres of it. Yes, I say Black Sabbath, the advent of heavy metal, but a lot of Black Sabbath's early tracks, you could probably fit them on a Led Zeppelin or Deep Purple record, and nobody would know the difference. Now, on that note, I would like to shout out Abigail DeVoe, who has a series called Vinyl Monday. Check it out. She's probably a better presenter than I am. Anyway, she had a video on Master Reality, and in it, she hypothesized that Black Sabbath's Master Reality is the crystallizing moment of doom metal because of the down-tuned guitars in particular on this record. Now, you could give earlier broad credit to bands like Iron Butterfly, a lot of early psychedelia. Remember, psychedelia and acid rock is going to bleed into the creation of early metal. Um, but Abigail DeVoe brings up the Power of Zeus in their album, The Gospel of Zeus. And if you listen to it, I think in particular track 5, The Death Trip, you are basically hearing doom metal a year before Master of Reality. It's just that the guitars are still tuned in a standard way, so you're not getting that extra low, fuzzy, thrumming, rolling doom sound. So, shout out to Abigail. Now, whether or not you agree that this is the founding of doom metal, it certainly seems to be. It is the most seems to be the most consistently praised Black Sabbath record. The production is generally agreed to be some of Ozzy's better singing. The sound of the instrumentation is better. Bill Ward, the drummer, even though he's kind of missing in action for a lot of this album, whenever he does show up, he's still got it. He's still got the stuff. And these riffs are classic for a reason. They get used, and they've been used again and again. You're going to notice over time on this channel that I do relatively few doom sludgy records on because I love Black Sabbath, and there's a lot of Black Sabbath worship that continues to this modern day in music, and I'll just listen to it and end up thinking, well, Black Sabbath did this better 50 years ago. So then I just go back and throw on their old records. So as far as I'm concerned, whether or not this is the first doom metal record in metal history, it certainly has continued to be the gold standard for the subgenre. So something I'm going to start doing is recommending 3 songs in particular on each of these albums, because metal albums, they even non-prog ones, tend to be really experimental, and so I want to point out ones that I think make up the core of the record that'll let you get the best feel for the record. So for Master of Reality, I think that's got to be Embryo / Children of the Grave for the Baroque acoustic section leading into the modern at the time, heavy metal doom sound. Number 2, Sweet Leaf, because it is the stoner metal album. And finally, albums Anthem. Maybe the whole album, though, is essential. And finally, Solitude. I think Into the Void is a great track. I just think that sound that they're making on Into the Void is done better on the Paranoid album. So if you want the Master of Reality experience, Solitude has to be listened to. And don't listen to Solitude in a crowd. Don't throw on Solitude at a party. You go into your room, close your eyes, and put your headphones on and curl in the fetal position and listen to Solitude the way it's meant to be after a breakup. All right. Next time, I plan on covering Black Sabbath's Volume 4, released and recorded in 1972. After that will be Sabbath, Bloody Sabbath, and then we'll probably finally cover other bands and subgenres of metal. I just wanted to get this foundation laid. By the way, I have set up a new thumbnail, which I'm hoping is going to eventually become a format for all the videos, at least the Metal Substance videos on the channel, so they're easy to notice when they pop up in your feed. Let me know what you think about it in the comments below. I appreciate it. Please be sure to subscribe so you'll be notified when the next one comes out. And remember that history will be written by the victor.